Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Zayin, Daf 27 of Masechta Megilla. Friends, I'm under the weather again, you know? What do you want me to tell you? I'm under the weather again. Yeah, no big deal. No big deal, I'm under the weather. No big deal. Yeah, I don't know. I push it. Yeah, I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? Alright, so, yeah. Today we're just continuing on kind of what we've been talking about, like selling like Sifrei Torah and things like that, and synagogues. So yeah, we're just gonna kind of continue on that. I got over here turmeric tea with honey, so l'chaim, that's taka good. Alright, here we go. So we're gonna start on Daf Chav Zayin, on the third line of the page. Who's ready? Darish bar kapore uwa. So bar kapore taka taught mai dichsiv. Oh, what does the pasuk mean? Vayisov is Beis Hashem, that Nebuchadnezzar. Who is Nebuchadnezzar? A big nudnik. So he burnt the Beis Hamikdash, Beis Hamelech, in the palace of the king. There's called Bate Yerushalayim, and all the houses in Jerusalem. It takes a big nudnik to do that. There's called Bayis Gadol, in every big house. Sorry, Bayis, she burnt it in fire. Beis Hashem, Beis Hamikdash. So when it says Beis Hashem, the house of God, it means the temple. Beis Hamelech, Elu Paltu and Shomelech. When it says the house of the king, it's talking about the palace of the king. When it says the houses, the homes in Jerusalem, that's precisely what it means, the homes in Jerusalem. And he burnt every big house. So what are these big houses? So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So it's Machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad Omar, Malkum Shmegadlen Bo Torah, V'chad Omar, Malkum Shmegadlen Bo Tefillah. One opinion is that these big houses are places where they study Torah. The other opinion is that it's where they pray, kilu, synagogues and study halls. All right. Madamar Torah dichsiv. So the opinion that says that it's talking about study halls is because the pasuk, it's like the pasuk says, Hashem chofetz matzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir, that the Eibishter desires that yagdil Torah v'yadir, that you should increase Torah. So therefore the Bayis Gadol is the bias that's yagdil Torah, that they sort of increase Torah in that place. So therefore it's a study hall. Madamar Tefillah, an opinion that says that it's talking about a synagogue, Tichsiv, is the pasuk says, Saper no, did I say that right? Yeah. Saper noli, Saper no agdolos asher asa Elisha. Tell me the greatness, the gedolos, the greatness, asher asa Elisha, that Elisha did, Elisha davad brachmi davad, and Elisha was all about prayer. So therefore, according to this view, so the Bayis Gadol, the big house, is a synagogue. So it makes sense to say that it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who says that this Bayis Gadol, this big house, is a place where is a study hall. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says Beis HaKnesses mutar lasoso Beis HaMedrash mamino, that a synagogue, you are permitted to convert it into a study hall, which means that study halls are like, greater, I guess, and therefore the Bayis Gadol would be the study halls. The study halls, it makes sense, therefore, that it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who says that Bayis Gadol is the study halls. So the Mishnah had said that if a fellow sells a Sefer Torah, he should not use the proceeds to purchase like Nach, Nevim, and Ksuvim, because that's on a lower level. So can you sell an old Sefer Torah in order to purchase a new Sefer Torah? Wow, what do you think? Can you sell an old Sefer Torah in order to purchase a new Sefer Torah? So on the one hand, you can argue, well, you're not raising it up, right? If you take like Nevim and Ksuvim and you use that to buy a Torah, so you're kind of upping the ante, you're going up a level. But if you sell an old Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah, well, they're both Sefer Torah, you're not actually going up, you're kind of staying the same. So maybe that's not allowed. Or perhaps, well, in a chinami, you're not going any higher because you can't go any higher. It doesn't get higher than a Sefer Torah. So maybe since in this case, circumstantially, you just can't get any higher, so maybe it would be allowed to kind of stay on the same level and purchase a new Sefer Torah. Tashma, come in here. Aval machru Torah lo yikhu svarim. Well, it says in the Mishnah that if they sold a Torah, they may not buy Nevi'im and Ksuvim. So svarim udalo, so they can't buy Nevi'im and Ksuvim. A Torah b'Torah shabridami, but you would be allowed to sell one Sefer Torah in order to purchase another Sefer Torah. So masnisin di'eved ki kami bayolon lechatchila. So the Gemara says eina chinami, but our Mishnah is talking about b'di'eved, right? It says machar Sefer Torah, that if he already sold the Sefer Torah, so then the question is, what do you do with it? So he said, okay, so you can't buy a Nevi'im Uksuvim, but you can use it for another Sefer Torah. That's if you already did it. What we're asking is, lechatchila, would you be allowed to, lechatchila from the outset, sell an older Sefer Torah in order to purchase a newer Sefer Torah? Tashmas, so the Gemara says, come in here, golden Sefer Torah, mitbachus chumoshin. So you're allowed to roll up a Sefer Torah in the sort of garments that you use for chumashim, right? So Sefer Torah is on a higher level than a chumash. So you could use sort of the cloth that's used for a chumash, you can use it, upgrade it for a Sefer Torah. Fine. And you can wrap up the chumashim in the garments from the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Aval, however, the Nevi'im and Ksuvim b'mitbachos shel chumashim, but not, you can't use the sort of cloths from chumashim for Nevi'im and Ksuvim, because that's a lower level. A chumash is basically the Torah, but it's like one sort of section of the Torah, like one of the 5 books, not all 5 of them together. And you cannot wrap the chumashim in these garments from these cloths from the Sefer Torah, because again, that's going down a step. But we said that you are allowed to wrap a Sefer Torah in the cloths of chumashim, mitbachos chumashin in mitbachos Sefer Torah lo. And what we want to say is that you can you can wrap a Sefer Torah in the rags of a chumash because it's an upgrade, but to wrap it with the rags of a Sefer Torah lo, so that would not be allowed. So we're saying that you would be allowed to wrap a Sefer Torah in these sort of cloths of a chumash, but not the cloth of another Sefer Torah. So we see that one Sefer Torah to another, you're not allowed to do. So we want to argue that you also would not be allowed to sell one Sefer Torah in order to buy another. Ema Sefer. But one second. If you read on, it says v'lo chumashim b'mitbachos Sefer Torah, that you're not allowed to wrap chumashim in the rags of a Sefer Torah. Torah b'Torah shabidami, implying you can't use the rags of a Sefer Torah for chumashim, but you can use them for another Sefer Torah. So elameha lekin mishmamina. So no. So rather, from here, there's sort of nothing conclusive that you could say in terms of would you be able to sell one Sefer Torah to buy another, an old one to buy a new one. Tashma, come in here, manichin Sefer Torah agabe Torah. All right, you're allowed to put one Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah. You're allowed to put a Torah on top of a chumash. You could put a chumash on top of navi and ksuvim. Aval lo neviim uchsuvim agabe chumashim. But you cannot put neviim and ksuvim on top of chumashim. Lo chumashim agabe Torah. You cannot put a chumash on top of a Sefer Torah. Hadacha ka'amar. So what are we saying? So we're saying, right, so the Brisa had said that you're allowed to put one Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah, that the 2 Sefer Torahs are sort of interchangeable in a sense. And therefore, you'd be allowed to sell an old Sefer Torah and buy a new Sefer Torah. So the Gemara says, no, Anachal Ka'amart. Come on, you're talking there about putting one Sefer Torah on top of the other. Shiny Anachal. Hanacha is its own, by putting one Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah is kind of its own thing. Tilo Efsher. Because it's impossible otherwise. The Lo Tema Achi, because if you don't say like this, Mikarich Heichi Karchinon, right? If you think about it, when you take a Sefer Torah and you roll it up, and it's all rolled up, so you have layers of Sefer Torah, one on top of the other, right? As you roll it up, you're rolling it into like layers of like these circular layers, and therefore, obviously, it's being rolled on top of itself, and therefore, if we say that you're not allowed to put a Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah, well then, how can you roll it up? Because you can have layers of the Torah on top of itself. So, therefore, Memele, it must be that that you're allowed to put a Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah, right? So Ella came to Efsher Shari, Hachanami came to Efsher Shari. So therefore, just right when it comes to rolling up the Sefer Torah, so you kind of don't have a choice. You have to have sort of one layer of the roll on top of another layer. So here also you could put a Sefer Torah on top of a Sefer Torah. However, there isn't necessarily, something for us to learn about. Can you sell one Sefer Torah and purchase another Sefer Torah? Tashma Kamanya da Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Listen up. It says Rabbi Bar Bachana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. V'im kol adam Sefer Torah yashon nikach bo chadash. A fellow should not sell an old Sefer Torah in order to purchase a new Sefer Torah. So there you go. You can't sell an old Sefer Torah in order to purchase a new Sefer Torah. To which the Gemara says, well, hasu mishum shiusa. Well, that's when, right? That's because we're worried about negligence, right? Meaning, if you sell the old Sefer Torah, you might not end up buying a new Sefer Torah, and therefore that's why we're saying not to do it. We're talking about a situation where you already have the new Sefer Torah lined up. You just don't have the cash to purchase it. So in this case, there really isn't a concern that you're not going to end up using the money from the old Sefer Torah for the new Sefer Torah. You have the new Sefer Torah ready to go. You just need some cash. So we're saying in this case, if you're selling the old one in order to buy the new one, maybe that would be okay. Tashma, says the Gemara, come in here. Dam Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Reb Meir. It says Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Reb Meir. What does he say? Ein mochrin Sefer Torah ela lilmod Torah v'lisa isha. That you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah if it's to go and study Torah, right? You want to go to the yeshiva, but you need some money. So you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah and use the proceeds of the Sefer Torah to support yourself in yeshiva. V'lisa isha, also to marry a woman. You're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah in order to marry a woman. Alright. Shmamina Torah b'Torah shapidami. So we see that Torah is interchangeable. That you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah in order to study Torah. So Megilla, I would say you'd be allowed to sell one Sefer Torah in order to buy another Sefer Torah. So Dilma Shaini Talmud Torah, Shatalmud Mevili de Maise. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe Talmud Torah is different, because if you study Torah, it can bring you to actually doing, acting out and acting upon the Torah that you study, which is a good thing. So therefore, maybe you could sell one Sefer Torah in order to study Torah, but maybe not to buy another one. Ishanami, also when it comes to getting married, lo so biro'ah, lo shevis yitzar. The Torah says that it says in Yeshaya, in the Navi, that the Eibishter didn't create the world in order for it to just be desolate. He built it, he created the world to inhabit it. And therefore we have to get married so we can have offspring. Avatar b'Torah lo, but maybe, one Sefer Torah for another Sefer Torah might not work. Taner Rabbanan, the Rabbi said, Sefer Torah, a fellow should not sell a Sefer Torah, af al pi she'eno tzarich lo. That a fellow should not sell a Sefer Torah, even though you might have another one, but still don't sell it. Yasser Akein Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and even more so says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, afilu ein lo mayochal. Even if a fellow doesn't have food to eat, umachar Sefer Torah or bito, and he sold a Sefer Torah, or he sold his daughter as a maidservant, he's never going to see any blessing on the money he received for selling a Sefer Torah or his daughter as a maidservant. And similarly with their proceeds. That is only if they sold it and there was leftovers. But if they collected money and there was leftovers, then it's mutter. So meaning, if you sell, so if you sell, a synagogue, and then you use the proceeds to purchase a ark, and then there's some leftover money, so you can't just buy pizza with it. But if they collected money in order to buy an ark and there was leftover money, so you can use it for pizza. Eis Abai taka asks the kasha. You ready for Abai's kasha? Bamid v'memur. So when do we say that the leftovers are osir, right? That the leftovers you can't just buy pizza with. Shelo hisnu. That's only if they didn't make some kind of a stipulation. Aval hisnu, but if they made a stipulation, afilu duchsusyo mutter. It's even mutter for duchsusyo. The Gemara is going to explain what duchsusyo is. But okay, Abai says, look, we have a brisa that says that when we say that you can't just buy pizza with this money, that's when they did not make a stipulation. But if they made a stipulation, not only can you use the money for pizza, you could use it for duchsusyo. So, hechidami, what's the case that we're talking about? If it's like you're saying, Rava, that it's talking about where they sold, like a synagogue and there was leftover money, kiesnu mayhave. So then even if they made a tanai that, they're going to do whatever they want with the money, still, it makes no difference. It's the proceeds of selling the synagogue. Of course you can't just buy pizza with it. No, rather it must be that they collected it and it was left over, time of the hisnu, and the reason why they could use it for pizza is because they made a stipulation. But if they didn't make a stipulation, so then you wouldn't be allowed to use it for pizza. So Abaye wants to say that actually when they collected money and there was leftover money, so then in that case you would not be allowed to use it for pizza. So the olam shemachu v'osiru. So actually, really, that price is talking about where they sold it and there was leftover money, and we're saying it's based on the stipulation. V'achikamer, this is what it means. Bamid v'mamurim shelu hisnu shiva tovi ha'ir b'maimed anshi ha'ir. When do we say that you're not allowed to use the leftover money for pizza? That is when there was no stipulation with two respected people in the presence of the rest of the city. 7 respected people of the city in the presence of the rest of the city. Aval hisnu shiva roi ha'ir b'maimed anshi ha'ir. But if there was a stipulation with in front of 7 good people, in front of all the people of the city, afilu duchsusyo nami mutter. So even when they sell like a synagogue and there's leftovers, and so if they make a stipulation, 7 good people of the city in front of the whole city, so then you can even use it for duchsusyos. So now Abaye says to a certain fellow who was sort of studying in front of Rav Sheshes, that he was going over his learning by Rav Sheshes. Mishmielach mi Rav Sheshes my duchsusyo. Hey fellow, did you hear from Rav Sheshes what maybe a duchsusyo is? So Amalei Hachi Rav Sheshes, the fellow says, yeah, this is what Rav Sheshes said. Parsha demato, a rider, a driver, fellow rides a horse. That's what a duchsusyo is. Omar Abaye says, Abaye hilka chaytzub merabanan deshama le milsav leyoda perusha. So says Abaye, what do we see from the story? That a fellow who heard something but he doesn't know what it means, so ask somebody who spends a lot of time with the rabbis, because mistama, he heard it from somebody great. Meaning Abaye needed to know what a duchsusya is, so he asked this fellow who was spending time by Rav Sheshes, because he can assume then that he heard the answer of what a duchsusya is from Rav Sheshes. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Rabbi Meir. B'nei ha'ir she'olchu le'ir acheres. Alright? You have people from a city, and the Taka went to a different city. That sounds like a lot of fun. They went on a road trip. Alright? So Taka went on a road trip. Ufaskale and Staka. Oh, so they got to the other city and they hit them up for some charity. No, Snin. Okay, so this group that went to the other city, so they give charity in the city. And when it's time to leave, they can take the money back. They can use it to fund charity initiatives in their own city. Okay, so you have this group of people who went from one city to the next, and then in that other city they hit them up for some money. So it's kind of like they can like reclaim it on the way out of the city, and then when they get back to their own city, they can just use that money for their own poor population. Tananami Hachi also in a brisa like this. Now, if you have people from a certain city that went to a different city, ufasku alei and stock it, and in the other city they hit them up for some money, nosnin, so they pay it. When they come back, so they bring when they go home, so they bring the money with them. All of tzedakah. But if you have an individual fellow who went to a different city and they said, hey, can we have some charity? So tinosin la'aniyei osaha'ir, so that charity should be distributed, should be disseminated to the poor people of that other city, i.e. he doesn't reclaim it on his way out. Rav Huna gazu tainisa, Rav Huna made a fast day. Alagabi Rav Chana bar Chaniloi. So Rav Chana bar Chaniloi was with Rav Huna, I guess in Surah. V'chol b'nei Maseh, and all the people, Rav Chana bar Chaniloi's entourage. Ramu alai tzedakah, they hit up Rav Chana bar Chaniloi for some charity. V'yavu, and they gave charity. Kibo l'meisei, when it was time to go back home. Amrule, they said to Rav Huna, Nos v'lan mar v'nezel, nu, can we have back our money and we'll go back to our place. When is and we'll use that money to support the charity initiatives in our own location. So Amr Lehu, so Rav Huna says to them, Tanina when do we say that you can reclaim the charity that you gave and pay it and disseminate it in your own city? So that is when there isn't sort of a Talmud Chacham in the city that hit you up. But if there's a Talmud Chacham there, like here in Surah, or wherever Rav Huna was, Tinasin l'chaver, so then you leave it with the Talmud Chacham. And certainly in this case, because your poor people and the poor people where I live, everyone is sort of relying upon me for charity anyway, so just leave the charity with me. Now it's very interesting, there was a Gemara in Masechta Brachos that describes a situation by Rav Chana bar Chaniloi, that he had this crazy house, and it was a big Baal Tzedakah, and people would come, and he would always give out a lot of charity. Rav Chana bar Chaniloi. There was a story there, I think, with the Chisda and the Ula, that they passed by the house of Rav Chana bar Chaniloi. It was destroyed or something. I think either Ula or Rav Chisda kind of cried out or something, and he described the great charity that would happen by the house of Rav Chana bar Chaniloi. It's very interesting. Alright, now we get to a new Mishnah in Mochrin es Sharabim Liyochid. So we don't sell a synagogue of a congregation to an individual, because then you're losing out on its holiness, right? Davar Kedusha is with 10 people, right? So if it was a congregation and now you're selling it to just one fellow, so you kind of lose out on that holiness. Divra Meir, that's the opinion of Meir. Amrlo, they said to Meir, Imkain Aflo Meir Gedol Katana. Well, if you're not allowed to sell it from a congregation to an individual, so then you also shouldn't be allowed to sell it from a large city to a small city. So, fact the Gemara, Shapi Ka'amrile Rabbanu Meir. So the rabbis are asking a good kasha to Meir. If you can't sell it from a congregation to an individual, then you shouldn't be allowed to sell it from a large city to a small city. Meir says, why? What's the problem with selling it from a large city to a small city? In both cases, there's a minyan. In both cases, it retains its sanctity. Whereas from a congregation to an individual, you lose out on the kedusha. There's no longer 10 people. Whereas the rabbi's opinion, who argue under Meir, they say, look, once already you have to be concerned for a congregation and an individual, well then you should be concerned about a large city and a small city, because Berova Madras Melech, the bigger multitude is the splendor of the king. So the rabbi said then you shouldn't even be able to sell it from a large city to a small city. Okay, and now we're up to another Mishnah. Ein mochrin beis hakneses ela al tanai. Okay, you can only sell a synagogue under a stipulation, that if they want it, they can take it back. Okay, so if there's a synagogue and I guess the congregants sell the synagogue, they can only sell it under the condition that if at any point in the future they want to reclaim it, they can. That is the opinion of Reb Meir. Whereas the Chacham say, that the Chacham say, no, you could sell it for eternity, the proper sale, with the exception of for 4 purposes. The merchatz, you cannot sell a synagogue for it to be a bathhouse, ulevorsky, or a tannery, the tvila for a mikveh, uleveis hamoyim, or something, or the beis hamoyim is maybe a bathroom, or a laundromat. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda mochun osa l'shem chotzer v'lokeach ma sheyirtze yaiseh. Rabbi Yehuda says, look, you can sell a synagogue as a courtyard, and then whoever buys it is buying a courtyard. Once he buys the courtyard, he can do whatever he wants with it. Now the Gemara asks a very interesting question. So according to Reb Meir, how could these people live in it? Ribis. It's interest. Oh my goodness gracious. So according to Reb Meir says an interesting thing. You have this congregation, they have a synagogue. They sell the synagogue. Fine. So Reb Meir says, look, if at any time in the future they want it back, so then they just have to give back the money that they paid for it, that they received for it, and then they can get it back, okay? So if they sold it for $1,000, so they received the $1,000, and at any point in the future, if they want to reclaim the synagogue, they just give back the $1,000 and they get the synagogue back. But here's the problem. The problem is that the party that the synagogue was sold to has been using the synagogue all the while and getting benefit from it. And therefore, if the original party at some later point says, look, we want our synagogue back, and Reb Meir is saying that they're entitled to get it back, and they give back the money to the people that they bought it from, well, the people that they bought it from are essentially charging the initial congregants interest, because the initial congregants are paying the buyers in order to reclaim their synagogue. They're paying the buyers the money that they paid for it, plus the fact that these buyers have been getting benefit from the synagogue for however long it was in their possession for. So they're getting the principal plus whatever benefit they've been receiving, and that would be considered interest. And of course interest is not allowed. Reb Meir b'shittas Reb Yehuda Amra. So it says Reb Yochanan, well, Reb Meir agrees with Reb Yehuda that one side of ribis is permitted, meaning in a situation like this where it may or may not come to a situation of interest. If the original congregants never ask for the synagogue back, so then the point is moot. Only in a case where they actually ask for it back, only at that point would you have to be concerned about the value that the buyers have been getting all along. So that wouldn't be considered a situation of interest that we have to be concerned about, since it's conditional. The Tanya is, we learn in the Brayso Harishaya, Noshe b'chaveru mono vasalo sadeu mecher. So if Ruvain owed Shimon money, so Ruvain says, Ruvain owed Shimon $100. So Ruvain says, look, here's my field, and if take it, and then eventually I'll pay you back. It's yours unless I can manage to pay you back. So bisman shemocher ochel peris mutter. So Tanakama says, look, as long as Ruvain reserves the right to eat the fruits of the field, so then it's allowed, because in the future, when Ruvain gets the $100 and he's able to pay back Shimon, he'll get back his field, and Shimon, who's getting back his $100, is getting back just that, just the $100, no additional benefit from the field. Lokeach ochel peris asur. But says the Tanakama, if Shimon gets the field and he gets to eat from the field, well then it's a problem, because when Ruvain gets the $100 and pays back Shimon, so then Shimon is getting the $100 that he lent Ruvain plus whatever benefit that he got from the field, and that's a problem. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says afilu lokeach ochel peris mutter, that even if Shimon were to have eaten from the field all the while, that would be fine, right? Because it's tzad echad b'ribis. It's not objectively ribis, because maybe Ruvain won't pay back the $100, in which case it'll just be Shimon's field, and therefore, it's sort of conditional, and therefore it would not be considered an issue of interest. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Maise Bitus ben Zunin. Says Rabbi Yehuda that there was a story with Bitus ben Zunin, she'aso sadeu mecher al pi Elazar ben Azariah, that he made his field sold. He kind of made his field sold it in this context, based on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, v'lokeach ochel peres haba. And it was a situation, says Rabbi Yehuda, where the lender was eating the fruits all the while, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah seemed to not have an issue with it. Amrulo, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, you bring a proof from there, mocher ochel peres haya. It wasn't a situation of the purchaser eating the fruits, it was a situation of the seller was eating the fruits, right? Bitus ben Zunin was eating the fruits the whole time, and that's why it was allowed. Okay. V'lo lokeach, fine, not the sort of person who acquired the field. My benayu, what's the nafkamina between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda? Tzad echad bribasika benayu. The difference is, do we say that sort of conditional ribis is a problem? Ma'asovar tzad echad bribis mutter, ma'asovar tzad echad bribis aser. That Rabbi Yehuda says that this sort of conditional ribis, if we can call it that, is acceptable. That in situations where if Reuben doesn't pay back the money to Shimon, so Shimon holds on to the field, so you don't have to be concerned about interest in that case. So Rav Umar Savar Tzadech Bribis Aser, whereas the Tanakama holds no, even in that case you have to be concerned about interest. Rava Omar says Rava D'Chuli Alma Tzadech Bribis Aser. No, everybody agrees, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that sort of this conditional interest is Aser, is not allowed. The question is it considered interest if he's planning to give it back? If Shimon is going to be giving back the value that he got from the field all the while, if he's going to give it back to Reuven, would that be considered okay? The Tanakh says no. Rabbi Yehuda says yes. So the Mishnah said that the rabbis say that you'd be allowed to sell this synagogue forever, i.e. without the right to reclaim it, without the right to reclaim it, as long as it's not for like those 4 items, like a tannery or bathhouse. Amr Rav Yehuda Amr Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, wow. So Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel that a person is allowed to pee within 4 cubits of where he prays. Alright. Rav Yosef my Kamash Milan Tonino. So Rav Yosef says, okay, what's the big deal? We already know that from a Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Omer says Rav Yehuda, Mochun also the Shumchotzer v'lokeach ma sheyirtzeh yaiseh. That you could sell a synagogue as a courtyard, and then whoever acquires it can do whatever he wants there. And even the rabbis who argue that's by an actual synagogue, that it has holiness. But just 4 cubits where you prayed, you happen to pray someplace, obviously you could pitch there. Tanitana Kamad of Nachman, certain teacher taught in front of Rav Nachman, a fellow who's praying, so after he's done praying, he goes away for Amos, and then he could pee his heart out. And vice versa. A fellow who's peeing his heart out, so when he's done, you just move over 4 Amos, and then you can go straight into Shemona Esrei. So Rav Nachman says, look, I understand why a fellow who's urinating needs to afterwards go 4 Amos away and to pray. So Tanina, because we learn in the Mishnah, how far away should you distance yourself from pee and from excrement? Dalet Amos, 4 Amos. So therefore, if you pee, so you have to go 4 Amos away to daven. But says Rav Nachman, what I don't understand is if you're praying, why do you have to walk 4 Amos away in order to pee? Why not just pee right then and there? If we say that you're not allowed to pee wherever you pray, well then you're not going to be allowed to pee anywhere in Nahar, because people are praying all the time in Nahar. Alright. People around here, they pee all the time. Yeah, mostly men. I guess guess they feel comfortable. Tani Yasha, Okay, fine. So we say, you don't actually have to go 4 amos away. It just means wait. Kilu, don't go straight from davening to peeing. Just wait a few seconds and then pee. So I understand why if you're peeing, you have to wait for, just a little bit of time, enough to walk 4 amos before you pray. Mishum nitzotzis, just in case there's drops of pee that are taking their time to drop. So you want to give them time to drop before you pray. But if you're praying, why do you have to wait a little bit before you can pee? So Ravashi, because for the time that it takes to walk 4 amos, if you've just finished praying, you still have the prayers on your tongue, on your lips, and therefore we want to wait until the prayers are no longer on your lips before you start peeing. So now we get into some interesting Gemaras about that they asked different rabbis about how they got long life. Alright, what do you think they said? Zalf and Simon, okay, there's some kind of way to remember things. Shalu Tamidav is Reb Zakkai. So Reb Zakkai's students asked him, how did you live so long? He said to them, well, I never peed within 4 amos of where I prayed. Alright, I didn't call my friends by their nicknames, and I never missed Kiddush, saying Kiddush on Shabbos Yom Tov. I had an old mother. One time, I needed wine for Kiddush. She sold her headscarf in order to make sure I had wine for Kiddush. When she died, she left for him 300 jugs of wine. Kishames, when Reb Zakkai passed away, he 10x'd it. He left for his children 3,000 pitchers of wine. Rav Huna Ava Osir Risa. So this is a very interesting story. That Rav Huna, one time, he wasn't wearing a proper belt. He was wearing like a I don't know, some kind of a reed of sorts around his waist to hold up his hoisin. So V'koy Kami the Rav, and he came before Rav. And Rav says to Rav Huna, "My high, what's the deal with this, makeshift belt?" So Rav Huna says, "Look, lo havali kidusha mashkante le'em yonoi." He says, "Look, I didn't have any money to buy wine for Kiddush, so I collateraled my belt, and that's why I'm using this sort of makeshift belt." So Vasoy Be Kiddusha, and that way I was able to make Kiddush. Rav says to Rav Huna, Yeraiva may be the will, the situm b'shiroi, that you should be covered in like silk garments. Ki ichlo Rabba Brei, when Rav Huna's son Rabba Brei to Rav Huna got married, Rav Huna inish gutzaham. Rav Huna was very short. He was like a dwarf, I guess. Gana Apuria, and he was lying on a bed. Asin Bante v'chalseich and his daughters and his daughter-in-laws, Shalchon v'Shadyon Manayu Alei, and they were throwing their clothing on him, Aditum b'Shirah, until he was covered with silk garments. Shama Rav v'Ikbid. Rav heard that this happened, that Rav Huna was on a bed and they were throwing silk garments on him, and Rav got very upset. How come? You hear this, friends? Rav said to Rav Huna, "Look, you should have said to me when I blessed you that you should be covered in silk garments. You should have said v'chein lamar, that I bless you back. That maybe it was taken Eis Ratzon. Clearly, it worked for you. If you would have blessed me back, maybe it could have worked for me." Oichet. Shalu Talmidav is Reb Elazar ben Shamua. So the rabbis, this Reb Elazar ben Shamua's students asked him, "How did you live so long?" Which is taka interesting, because Reb Elazar ben Shamua was one of the Asar Harugi Malchus. He said to them, "I never used the synagogue as a shortcut. And when I went to the study hall, so if everybody was sitting on the floor, I didn't sort of walk around them because it would look like I'm kind of like trampling on them. And I never did the priestly blessings without making a blessing first." Reb Elazar ben Shamua apparently was a Kohen, which is super interesting. Anyways, friends, that was the Chavav of Masechta Megilla. I think it was a pretty interesting daf. we discussed sort of like, can you sell a Sefer Torah for another Sefer Torah? So we said, look, if there's another one that's, if you don't have another one that's ready to be purchased, then no, you can't sell one Sefer Torah. But if it's already ready to be purchased, you just need to sell one in order to buy another one. It seems like we don't necessarily have a proof to say that you would be able to do that. Okay. Then we talked about like selling synagogues, and can you buy pizza with the leftovers? So Rava wanted to say that if they sold it and there were leftovers, you would not be allowed to use the leftovers for pizza. But if they collected money, so then that would be okay. Abaye wants to say that even if they sold it, it depends. If sort of these fancy people in the city said that they want to buy pizza with it, so then you'd be allowed to use it for pizza. We had an interesting thing at the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph about when you have a whole group of people that they go to another city and they hit them up for money. So on the way out, they can ask for the money back so that they can support the poor people in their own city. We said that if it's just one person who travels to that other city, so then he should leave the money in the city that he went to. And we pointed out if there's a Talmud Chacham in the city, so then even if it's a whole group, you should leave the Talmud Chacham, you should leave the money with the Talmud Chacham in that city. We got to another Mishnah, Machlokas between Reb Meir and the Chachamim, that Reb Meir says that a synagogue that belongs to a congregation should not be sold to an individual. The Chachamim said if that's the case, then even a synagogue in a large city should not be sold to a small city, because so we said that Meir, he's concerned specifically about kedusha, that when you have a congregation, they have kedusha because they're 10 people, whereas an individual doesn't have holiness. It's just one person. And whereas the Chacham say, yeah, but even from a big city to a small city, you're losing out because of Rav Majus Melech, that you don't have sort of the multitudes, which is good. Now, then we saw a three-way machlokas about selling a synagogue. Reb Meir says that if you sell a synagogue, the sellers always reserve the right to reclaim it. Whereas the Chachamim say, no, they say once it's sold, it's sold. There are just 4 situations that you can't sell a synagogue for. For example, like a tannery or a bathhouse. And Reb Yehuda says, no, you sell the synagogue as a chotzer, as a courtyard, and then the buyer can do whatever he wants with it. We asked a very interesting question, that according to Reb Meir, that you can always reclaim it, but then when you reclaim the synagogue and give the fellow back his money, if he was eating the fruits the entire time, won't it be interest? So one way to answer it was to say that Reb Meir holds like Reb Yehuda, that no, it would not be considered interest. We saw 2 ways of understanding the machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Reb Yehuda regarding, when in the situation where Ruvain owes Shimon money and he gives Shimon a field, so would Shimon be allowed to eat the fruits? The Tanna Kama says no. Reb Meir says yes. We had 2 ways of understanding that machlokas. One way is that Reb Yehuda says that in sort of a conditional ribbis, such as over here, that it's only potentially going to be interest if Ruvain ends up giving the money to Shimon, so that would not be considered an issue of interest. The other way to understand is that no, everybody agrees that conditional interest is a problem. Over here, it's that Shimon was going to give Ruvain back the fruits, and that's what makes it. And in that case, it would be okay. We talked about peeing and things like that, and then at the end, we started talking about different rabbis and what they did to merit long lives. Friends, peace out.